nobody speaks Gondi, very few people speak Gondi, so how do you find out what's going on? You know, either with the Maoists or with somebody else, you know. Journalists don't have the access into that space. To come to your question about what was it like, I mean, I'll say unhesitatingly that whatever the 15, 16, 18 days that one was inside there were probably the most sort of memorable days of my life, you know. I think that I met a very, very extraordinary bunch of people there who were sort of warm and very bright, very curious about the world. And this includes people who have been inside for 18 years, 17 years, very bright, very curious about the outside world, very engaged, and altogether very impressive people. Now these were not Politburo members or Central Committee members, and maybe that was a good thing, you know, that we didn't meet people like that. But certainly the younger people, you know, at most, I think the oldest person I've probably met may have been in his early 40s. Maybe a couple of the women were older, in their 50s. So very, very, I mean, I know this sounds incongruous to say, but I don't think I've ever laughed as much as I've laughed in those 15 days, because once they realized that one didn't take oneself too seriously, they were, you know, from 6 in the morning, the joking and the ribbing and the humor would start till 11 o'clock at night. So it was curiously a very extremely pleasant experience. There were, and you know, see, once you're inside, and we were in the deep core, so there's not really that much threat also, you know. So the tension is not there. The tension is when you're going in, and the tension is when you're coming out. And yeah, so, and I thought, you know, this, for example, the business of showing their faces and all that, which is an important sort of dilemma that one had, but eventually I thought it was much more important to do that than to not do that. You know? To have that, to try and understand in whatever limited way you can with material like this, that who are these guys, you know? Who are these soldiers who are linking arms with the adivasis and dancing at Bastar? What do they look like? You know, we don't see CRPF men dancing with the adivasis, no? So who are these people? That kind of, what connects them in some limited way? I'm not, obviously in 15, 18 days you can't come up with a deep analysis of that relationship, but there is a relationship, and you know, you can see it.
Just one, maybe small thing related to this. I'm just curious in terms of audience reaction. There's one moment in this film which was really funny. I noticed everybody laughed when this Gandhi dialogue was happening. I remember reading Bhagat Singh. He is also making the same point about this cult of non-violent utopianism. But that is not a funny thing, it's a criticism.
Yes.
So is it your experience that whenever you show this film, it has become funny in a way that in a serious manner? That this kind of Gandhian position which says that the centrist party today wants to preach is no longer.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It was placed there in a provocative sort of way. But I didn't think it would play for laughs, you know, although there's something faintly, or I suppose, comic as well about it. But to answer your question, yes, it invariably gets a titter from the audience, you know, and it's also very, I'm very intrigued by that. You know, it just, you know, sometimes it tells you something about what people are thinking, or, you know. Sometimes somebody will ask me in the Q&A that, you know, why did you bring in Gandhi when there's nothing else which, you know, he's not part of the debate? And I said, because with that cultural troop, who were doing that stuff, Punjab Lok Sabha Samiti, Manch. I saw this play being performed twice, and I realized that this was a very important part of that play, which they do. And I actually asked him, I said, so, did you make this up? And he said, no, this is something like, it's properly documented, including his last line. When they said, "Aap aur kuch bolna chahenge?" and he said, "Mere paas sama nahi hai." So, and this was just after Jallianwala Bagh. So these guys really go to town on it. It's like a big thing. Of course, in the same play, they take the pants off the Akali Dal also, because the way the Akalis, honored the British in the Golden Temple and all that. So that is even more ludicrous. The completely servile way in which they welcomed these guys into the Golden Temple after Jallianwala Bagh, in order to sort of whatever. So they basically go after, this Vangar, the play. It's they go after all their targets, saying, okay, so these are the guys who Sikh Maryada who will protect it. These guys who were kissing the ass of General Dyer's people. Yeah, sword, saropa, everything, they were completely, you've been doing some reading of this. Yes. Sorry?
Who gave the slogan to General Dyer?
Not to Dyer, but post Jallianwala Bagh, they were honored in the Golden Temple.
Who honored?
Somebody, they are wearing blue pugs, and they are Akali Dal people, I presume. I can tell you with a little effort, but this is how I saw it done in this performance over several days. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please.
I found the juxtaposition of Punjab with Delhi and that's interesting. But I was thinking that there are two places where the development is coming and the resistance is gaining against the development, against the Dada. But in Punjab context, it's also the situation after post-Green Revolution, where now the myth of Green Revolution has already been challenged by many people, and also now people are facing the problems of Green Revolution in Punjab. So I found that Punjab part about Pash and Bhagat Singh, it's also a kind of nostalgia. Made people to relive the memory or honor and celebrate that memory of these revolutionaries. But somehow I find that I wish you would have also shown little much about the nature of kind of resistance now going in Punjab against the now companies which are coming, and kind of resistance which is going against trident like companies. And a Singh and ground-like situation is again coming up in Punjab, so where the lands of the farmers are being taken away, and so these kinds of.
I'm with you. I would have been mortified if the Punjab sequence is read only as some nostalgia. That certainly was not intended. And perhaps the hints of whatever else they're talking about are maybe too subtle, and they don't have enough balance. But for example, when the Naujawan Bharat Sabha has its rally, what are the speeches about? They are globalization, privatization, Nijikaran diya nitiyan, all that kind of thing. When Amolak speaks, what is he talking about? He's also talking about when Singur happens, when Nandigram happens. It's real, because there are 3,000 people out there. They're not just sitting in some Gadri museum and sort of being nostalgic. So in that sense, that's what I want to. So obviously you know something about Punjab, right? So that's why you're saying what you're saying. But if you didn't, and if someone it got hinted at, or people kind of got a sense of what's going on. That's where I want to stop. In this film, that's where I want to stop. So, I could have got it wrong. I could have played it so delicately that miss ho gaya, But that's really what I want. That through Amolak and what he's saying at various points, or the character of the slogans, or when Amolak says, I don't think displacement is only about Adivasis. Displacement is our way of life being taken away from us. He's quite poetic about that. And what do you mean by way of life? So these are just the little threads that one, but your sort of summary of what is not there is actually exactly what I want to be just off field. And I would hope that other people might reach it as well. But if one it doesn't work, then it doesn't work.
Sorry, he's working on the data. He's working on the data.
Yeah. So as we see the anti-established movements across the world, most of the movements, they are very much sophisticated. When it comes to the point of tribal question in India, it's a bit problematic, I feel, because how far it is right to expect them to confine themselves in jungle? The way you depicted in the video, it's like in a way you glorified it. And I myself from northern Telangana, we also faced many operations, many situations like operations. But what I feel, at what extent it is right to ask the tribal people to confine themselves to the forest?
Well, I don't think I would be disappointed if I was seen as glorifying something which people didn't want to do. Just like I would be disappointed if people thought I was glorifying whatever vision the Maoists are providing to them. But at the same time, I have no doubt that at this point, if the Dongariya Kond of the Niyamgiri Mount Hills don't want to move there, despite the fact that they have no schools, no health, no nothing, they're doing it for a good reason, because that's the only way they will survive. Because if they give their land away, they are finished. There's no way that they will survive. It's not a new debate that is development what is being offered to them. That I don't even have to with people in this institution.
I'm trying to compare this movement with Northern Telangana region.
Yes.
So I was very close to that movements and all. I was just closely observing them.
Yes.
So these kind of debates were there. Still, people just came out from the Naxalite movement and they found their lives like anything.
Yes.
So in that context, I'm just trying to.
The thing is that also in Bastar, let's get one thing clear. This is not a debate about ideologies as far as the Indian state is concerned. It's a search for mineral resources. So the reason they want to go in there is not because they want to contest the ideology of the Maoists. They want to go in there because they want the iron ore from Bailadila, or they want the bauxite from the Niyamgiri hills, or they want whatever from Kashipur and whatever they want. So sometimes I think it's a bad idea to think that this is some about two visions of development, or is it okay for us to leave the Adivasis in the forest or not? Because actually it's about something else. Certainly in Bastar and Odisha it's about something else, and actually even in Punjab it's swiftly. He's right. The crisis in agriculture is so severe that actually, being in farming is not a viable proposition anymore. So land is disappearing so fast, because it's being acquired for all kinds of other things. So it's again in the case of Punjab, it's not some ideological conversation which is going on. It's a question of the earth is being taken out from underneath your feet. So partially to what has stopped us, if you and I are the people who are offering that model, what has stopped us from offering the people outside of the Maoist area that model of development? Where are the hospitals in the non-Maoist areas of Chhattisgarh, in northern Chhattisgarh for example? Where are the schools, where the healthcare, the situation is as bad there. So actually, the whole conversation should be about the model of underdevelopment that we are seeing in Odisha and Chhattisgarh, where it is extremely important to keep those areas underdeveloped because the map is already there. यहाँ पे ये है, यहाँ पे ये है, यहाँ पे ये, you know, we know where everything is. So it's taking time, you know, till they get there. This is the great book written by Felix Padel and Samarendra Das called Out of This Earth, about mining in Odisha. And they show you these maps made in the 19th century, where every single bauxite deposit was already mapped. And which are the first places that the roads connect are those places. Which are the first places the rail line connects, those are the places. I have traveled in Odisha, maybe 200 miles away from the coast. And there's a beautiful highway funded by IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development, as cyclone relief. Cyclone kahan hua, uska damage is somewhere else. But the road was built by IFAD connecting the bauxite deposits. So, you know, that's what it's about actually, you know, and therefore, you know, one can, for theoretical reasons, get into the other debate.
I may not be informed well. Liberalization, globalization, these theories, they give very bad effect on the pattern of the society. People argue in that way. But how I see, actually the feudalistic pattern of society is completely disturbed. For example, couplers. Most of the poets, regional poets, they are trying to glorify the occupational practices. Actually, there is a kind of stigma attached to these occupations. So, by this globalization, in a kind of, it is completely devastated. It has to be replaced with another kind of pattern. It's my opinion.
No, I mean, it's a very complicated territory. But sometimes I think it also, you know, we have only one notion of what an Adivasi is. You know, sometimes if you go to the northeast, for example, you see a very different, I mean, I don't know much, but I certainly have traveled in Arunachal, for example. And there to be an Adivasi is a very different experience, and it has been for historical reasons. And the viability of a certain way of life, you know, it's true that in northern Telangana or in some of these parts, the viability of even the Adivasi way of life has been deeply damaged, you know. And I agree with you, and not just Adivasi, but even non-Adivasi society. And those things must be things, but I don't think the reaction to that is that what is all this Adivasi business, everybody should be out of it, you know. I think that there is still an enormous space in which that whole thing has to be respected for what it is, you know. And not without glorifying it or romanticizing it, just appreciating it, you know. There's nothing wrong with that.
We also need to leave this room. Is there any last questions?
Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
I've had 2 hours, so it's your turn now.
This is startup. Thank you. Somewhere during this film, at the start of it, you say that even those who do not believe in socialism resort to socialist revolution. One assumption there is it's only the capitalist class state. But there is also been a criticism about the Dalits and adivasis resorting to socialist revolutionary comes with a certain problem. It's a tradition. There is a scene in this film between Punjab and there's a scene there which I think is slightly uncomfortable. resorting to that Punjab narrative to frame this, these certain questions die here. And also the other thing that I wanted you to say something about is, in the beginning of the film you have the voiceover, where you speak. And later it seems to be left to others. Much of the second half, others' voice that carries the narrative, or anchors it. You say something about this?
Yeah, both. I'll do both. See, in a sense, the Punjab sequence is meant to destabilize or whatever, to create some kind of I don't think it creates a rupture, but basically I thought it would be very interesting to see how, if you watch this film about Bastar, about Odisha, and then you see a certain kind of revolutionary rhetoric in the context of a post-Green Revolution Punjab, that I would be interested in how the audience would respond to that. That it's actually left. It's I won't say it's a provocation, but it's unresolved. It is unresolved. Yeah, I'm putting it there not because I'm saying draw a straight line between Bhagat Singh and Pash and the left in Punjab and Bastar. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying that what is it that's keeping, I want people to wonder what is it that's keeping that idea alive in Punjab. And so it's just it's a device. It was an idea that came late into the film, but meant to constantly, so that it's not something that the idea of this of revolution being only something that now can happen in the forest, and it's something that because the film is really a kind of reflection on the revolutionary ideal, so to speak. So to me, Lingaraj Azad in Niyamgiri or Raddosi Kaka also, they do see themselves as revolutionaries, although again there's no connection with what's happening in Bastar. So they are unlikes. I'm no problem in that is what it's meant to be, and one is hoping that the sort of Punjab being the sort of the poster boy of the capitalistic agriculture and that whole paradigm, that it will set up some question. This comment about the voiceover, you're the second person who's made it, and I'm actually completely taken aback by it, because it must be true. Although I am taken aback by it, like it's not intentional in that sense, But usually the way the voiceover works for me is that I use it to just sort of set the scene, and then sometimes to make very key interventions. So initially there's a little bit of a density because you're just sort of putting some markers. I want people here to hear the word Naxalite, and I want them to know where did the people's war. It's just some basic sort of information in that sense. And later it's much more, if you were to scrutinize it closely, that may not be true, but there is, because you don't see Azad, so you imagine that it's sort of, it's becoming like the voiceover, whereas the people who you see, they obviously, you see them and there's an identification. But there is something in what you're saying. I mean, you're the second person who said this to me recently, and it's had me thinking.
Just curious, I not ask cliche questions about your ideology or your background. So just two things. One was, at one point in the film, there's a mention you make where you're saying that in Niyamgiri, there is no Naxalism in that sense. The protest comes from among the tribal community.
I don't use the word Naxalism, I say that there is no
Sure,
guerrilla war.
There's no guerrilla war of that,
Yes.
the kind that you show in Bastar. But I thought that was a very important thing, because there is a very nuanced historical idea there that there is resistance among the tribal communities as a history of the tribal communities, which begins way back, course, dates pre-colonial times, way back. So I was wondering why you didn't focus, and what I found problematic was the stereotypical depiction in Niyamgiri, again and again, the rituals and the dance, you know, where the tribal, the gaze of the camera is again very cliche on the tribal. That's one question. The other is, of course, Bash was really beautiful, evocative poetry, and there's no need to make connections between what's happening in Punjab and the other. Once you answer this question of mine about stereotypical images and not going into the nuances of tribal histories of protest itself, I mean, without the coming of
Okay,
Marx.
you asked me 3 questions. I hope I can keep track. You might have to remind me. The first was about the tradition of tribal resistance. I thought the whole point of the time we spent at the Bhumkal was to draw attention to that tradition of tribal resistance, which has now been, depending on where you're standing from, either co-opted or enveloped or mixed with what the Maoists bring there. So Gundadhur is, after all, doesn't come from the Marxist sort of tradition. You know, he comes from the adivasis. So my evocation of Gundadhur or the other tribal rebellions, and visually what you see. Your second question is something which I find fascinating, and I'm glad it's coming up in an audience like this. I don't understand why if I show the Adivasi in a warlike posture, that's not exotic, or there's no problem of my gaze there. But if I show the Adivasi at a wedding, my gaze becomes problematic. You know, to me, my chancing upon a wedding there was for me a fundamental moment when I was shooting the film, because the beauty and the color, I'm not embarrassed to say, why are we so hobbled by our political correctness that we can't even look at an Adivasi in full splendor without saying, oh, there's a problem with my gaze. You know, to me, to see the beauty of a Dongaria Kond wedding, and I remember the thought that was going through my head was, there is more culture and grace in the way the sari is knotted at the back of some of these women than Anil Agarwal and Vedanta can summon up in 100 years, you know. So I'm not at all afraid of, of celebrating that, you know. That's something we have lost. And I think I don't know, I'm not so restrained as to think that that's something I'm going to shy away from, you know. If it's overdone, that's a problem. That, you know, I accept that. But I bring it late in the film because, you know, I think it's a reminder of something, especially because it's on top of a mountain top which could disappear in a year or in 6 or, you know, whatever. So, I don't know if I've answered your question.
I asked this question in a context. The context was that while you show Bastar and while you're showing the Mao's presence in Bastar and this involvement, obvious involvement with the people and the communities. Okay, there the gaze, I have the problem with that gaze as well.
Yeah.
But that's not for this audience answers. But what I'm saying is, there's a context to the camera's gaze on Niyamgiri. Having said that Niyamgiri's protest is very organic. It comes from among the tribals without any outside involvement coming and giving them that.
That's not true.
Ideology.
I don't think that would be true. Lingaraj Azad comes from a long tradition of Gandhian socialists who are as much outsiders in Niyamgiri as the Maoists are in Bastar. And frankly, I don't think the Maoists are outsiders in Bastar either. Anybody who reads the history of Bastar would know that it's a porous place. There has been traffic, you know. So so I think that part of the problem may be that we think of the Dongaria Kond are in some senses more aloof from society because they live on mountain tops and so on and so forth. But I think it would not be, it wouldn't be correct to think that the Niramgiri Suraksha Samiti is in some senses some incredibly autonomous thing that Loddo Sikaka thought of. Loddo has his Guru Gunya is, as he himself says, Lingaraj Azad. So in that sense, there is a tutoring which has gone on there, and I'm not using that in a negative way, I'm saying it in a positive way. So I don't think we should see these as some pristine, one is pure, one is sullied, one is impure. I don't see it like that at all.
Pressure on my audience. They have to ask anything.
I find a very clear and very subtle sort of juxtaposition in the images that you use in the entire document. Can you comment on like how did you actually think about it?
In terms of the form of it, like how do you?
Like, see, if there is an image of the rebellions, the next shot would be something else. It's called as.
I work with an editor who's a very extraordinary collaborator actually. I mean, who helps shape the film in a very, very strong way with me. What we do is that obviously you look, it's because the film doesn't have some straight narrative, it doesn't have a particular story, there are no characters as such. So that's the longest part of making the film. I mean, actually the footage is probably shot in 8 or 9 weeks, all across Punjab, whatever. But the process of editing took a year, you know, because you're trying to carve out an argument which is not even totally clear in your own head when you start off. And maybe it's not totally clear even when you finish, you know. The argument will come out later, you know, when viewers see it and viewers read into it, because what is an argument which your viewer doesn't get, you know. So, yeah. But just as a guiding principle, one tries to, the attempt has been in this film and the previous film to find a kind of form which is, keeps pace with one's politics. You know, it's not that the politics is way ahead of the aesthetics or the aesthetics are way ahead of the politics, but somehow to find a way, and how do you get the image to transmit some of the complexity of what you want to say, you know, to retain the ambiguity so that people are, you know, because I'm not trying to convince, I'm trying to destabilize in some senses. So some of what comes up as criticism, I'm quite happy with that criticism, because that's what, you know, it's intended to do. You know, it's intended to say, what does that have to do? You know, why? You know, like that. Those questions are quite important for me. And at the same time, increasingly, how do you just find those images and look at them carefully, and then see how the arrangement of images. Say, for example, the voiceover of Azad. You know, it's a very strong element, and it's not something I discovered or anything. It's been in the public domain for many years, several years. But it has very diverse reactions from audiences, and I'm happy with all those. You know, somebody wrote a piece in some magazine saying that for him it was the find of the film. You know, he thought that was the most powerful thing. A close friend of mine who's a filmmaker, she said, I found it very chilling, you know. And actually, both may be true, you know. It's both very powerful and very chilling. And that's the kind of space, both in image and sound, that I'm looking for. That, how do you get the audience so that they're never totally sure where they ought to be? That's very important to me. I mean, the kind of political space that I'm interested in creating around the viewing of the film. That's
So I found the Punjab part most fascinating. I really liked it. I thought there was something going on there which is different from these other two sections. The Naxalite story, it's a familiar story. Even the visual language is, it's been done before, right? It's something new. And there is some topical interest and great interest in the Nepali story. But this, I felt each of them maybe is, in that sense, a story distinct in itself. And personally, as I suppose a viewer from a southern context, I would have liked to see what this Punjab story is all about. What are the other dimensions of it? Who are these people and so on. But here, this juxtaposition, these three together, it doesn't satisfy me in that sense. And this is, okay, one can put that to you. But the second part of it, I'm wondering if it's not by that move, one doesn't sort of reduce them to instances of a revolutionary ideal in its manifestation, and whether that's not, you think there's a problem.
You mean there's more to it than just that?
Yeah, but because each instance may have not a pertinence to a revolutionary ideal that we all share or what desire to have and so on, but have its own specific
Absolutely.
Dynamic.
Absolutely.
So in other words, let's say the cognitive or the curiosity factor about such a movement and its is kind of given to short
Sure.
in the service of something else, I think.
Yeah. Okay, first, technical observation that I find that when a film has when it offers you these choices. So, my film in Kashmir is about something called Kashmir. So, people don't have that difficulty in encompassing whatever it includes, even if there are contradictory impulses, because they imagine this is the same place. That place is Kashmir. In the Narmada story, whether you are in Gujarat or wherever you are, whatever the the dissonances are, it's something encompassed by something called Narmada. In this case, by choosing to do this, we are running that risk that people will say, oh, I like Odisha better than, a lot of people have said to me, the Punjab works best for me, or, like it's set up a kind of framework in which people have to choose then, In which case, I understand what you're saying, that, the individual narratives get short shrift in the service of the larger exposition of something called a revolutionary ideal. But that's the film I wanted to make, And I can understand that there will be dissatisfaction. Many people felt that they wanted to know more about Punjab, for example, or whatever. But that I'm hoping that maybe in a day or two, they might think of it differently. Because my way of dealing with what I'm trying to deal with, increasingly, I'm not being clever or smart here when I say that I don't want to satisfy my audience. I don't want them to say, I got it, or great film, I understood what's going on. I don't want that to happen, actually. I want them to puzzle about, so what actually is going on in Punjab, that kind of thing. So, I'm not saying it works, but what you are, there's a attempt sometimes that just when you think that they're beginning to, the story is settling down, you pull it away. Because you don't want them to get into, I don't want you to necessarily know what's happening with the Bharatiya Kranti Union on the ground. I want to keep it floating at the level of that, what we call, Krantikari Sambhavnayan, possibilities of revolution. So it may fail, but that's the intention, you know. So you know, so yeah, I mean, I'm not what you're saying. Rather perversely, I'm not seeing it as a criticism of the film. I'm just saying that, well, yeah, that's what we tried to do. Now, whether if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But you know, and obviously one is sad to hear that. But that was the intention.
Depicted circumstances under which the people were being suppressed or being treated in a wrong way, or they have been snatched away their rights and their properties. So if this continues, maybe they will be reacting this way. Is this what depicting on initially?
You know, for example, to refer back to the Odisha material, the fact is that it's open knowledge that Odisha and even parts of Kashipur are pretty much on the edge. You know, the fact that it has been a non-violent movement is not a permanent state of being. Any moment it can shift. What do we mean by non-violent? For example, the Gandhamardhan movement, which is known as to be a peaceful non-violent movement, there's a long history of beating up contractors, people, and burning their bulldozers and sending their jeeps over the edge of the cliff and all that. This is not non-violent, you know. There was no soul force involved there. It was pretty, you know, muscle force was different.
It's a reaction, frustration.
Sorry?
It's a frustration of sorts.
No, I don't. Why should we reduce it by calling it frustration? I think it's called a political understanding. You know, at the end of the day, in Kashmir, until 1988-89, if you had told somebody that there's an armed rebellion around the corner, no one would have believed you. You know, despite Pakistan and everything. So how is it that from 1990, for 15 years, the Kashmiris were giving the Indian army a run for their money? You know, because, you know, at some point, some people will make a political choice. It doesn't have to be everybody. So I think it's. I don't think it's political to say, oh, if you oppress people too much, then they will turn to the weapon. You know, I think it's also at some point is a tactic. And similarly in Kashmir, you could argue that people have actually decided that tactically it's not working right now. That armed militancy is not working. The Indian state is too powerful to tackle in the military way. So let's take 3 steps back. So I would like to see it. I may be wrong. I would like to see all these as tactical moves rather than some, you know, if you squeeze people, then they will turn to arms and, you know, whatever. It's like people will take a call when they have to. I mean, there's a bit in the Nimgiri footage where Lingaraj Azad is talking to these people, and this guy is so angry at the harassment at the hands of the police. He says, you know, next time they come, we'll get together and we'll just kill them, you know. So that's anger, right? That's what you're talking about. But there is a political category which is beyond that, which is that, okay, now if you have to deal with this, there is going to be only one way of dealing with it. Let's start, you know, sabotaging their jeeps, or sabotaging their bulldozers, or let's get some weapons. And it has happened in Kashipur. Very interesting. There was this incident a couple of years ago when 9 young people were killed, and 8 of them were the children of Kashipur activists, people who come from exactly the same tradition that Lingaraja Dada, the Gandhian socialist tradition. These were kids who had grown up in those homes, and they had joined the Maoists, and they were brutally killed. They were like kids. They were just had disappeared from their homes for 2-3 months, and they were killed. So you will see that kind of shift happening you could see that kind of shift happening.
Seeing this, I was reminded of some of the African revolutions, somewhat similar to this. So they were also of the same nature, circumstances, outcomes.
Yeah.
Have you had this?
Actually, generally, hear a word, nurseries or adivasis. I don't know why, but it happens with me. We get a kind of fear inside. We think that fear about those people because they have guns and all. But then we see the depiction that you made here. I'd like to know something different than the film, that is the life behind the camera, your experiences behind the camera. Because I heard in one of the found audios, a commander or brigadier, he said that let it be a journalist, kill them, we'll see about documents. So what kind of experience you had there in that place?
Okay, firstly, that our audio is a piece of sound that has been around for 5 or 6 years. And again, it's very interesting that it was released to the press, it was everywhere. It's, it was like in the public domain. And it's quite interesting that no one ever chose to use it in any way possible. That was basically this SP in Bijapur. He was talking on the wireless to all his thanedars, and obviously the Maoists tapped it and recorded it, and they gave it out as CDs. The footnote to that is that the only punishment the SP got for that was that he was shifted to the State Human Rights Commission. It is obviously there is in Chhattisgarh, in Raipur, there's been a decimation of anything approximating a civil society. So I mean the arrest and incarceration of Vinayak Sen, for example, or the demolition of the ashram of Himanshu Kumar in Dantewada. This was just this, like whatever few pockets there are of places through which you can actually see what's going on. You just terrorize people by just scaring them away. So in that sense, journalists also work in a very narrow. There are some journalists who have done very good work, but it's a very tight thing. You can